I received the letter on a morning thick with fog and cold, the kind of dawn that pretends the sun might arrive, but never does. The envelope was heavy, creamy parchment sealed with burgundy wax. No return address, just my name in tight, careful calligraphy. Inside was a page that read, "To you have inherited 27 Hillcrest Road, built 1883, currently unoccupied. You are the sole beneficiary, effective immediately. The property is yours, all legal fees covered. Fire insurance is in effect. The old cellar was re-bricked in 1993 and forgotten. Enjoy the peace. Margaret Ames, attorney at law." I felt a familiar pang, equal parts curiosity and dread. My grandfather's death was a small newspaper blip. Cancer, they said. No funeral, no memorial, no explanation. He and I weren't close. Our last conversation was a terse exchange over property lines 6 years ago, and I'd sworn I'd never visit that house again. Until now, I believed I didn't care about it. I was wrong. Upon arrival, the house crouched at the top of a hill like a dark jewel set in brambles. The porch sagged, the paint peeled in vertical streaks, and the windows stared blankly, shuttered. I parked the car and stared at it for a long moment. A sign hung on the door hinge. "Vacant, please keep gate closed 27. Hillcrest Road, the keys fit with ease." The front door swung open on a single groan, revealing a foyer dim from decades without light. Dust motes floated in the air, glittering like ghosts. I flipped the light switch out of habit. Nothing happened. I sighed and walked to the nearby breaker box, flicking a switch. A shudder echoed through the house. Lights buzzed to life, and I jumped at the sound. Inside, everything felt frozen. 4-foot-high stacks of newspapers lay in a corner. A coat rack hung empty. The wallpaper had bubbled and curled at the edges. The place smelled of damp wood and old memories. I began to explore the rooms methodically from floor to attic. The living room had a stone fireplace, hearth cold and filthy. The dining room table still bore a faded lace cloth, embroidered decades ago. The kitchen appliances were yellowed with rust. Upstairs, bedroom floors creaked underfoot. The bathroom sinks porcelain chipped. The attic was bare save for a trunk filled with old photographs, family gatherings, children gone gray with time. During daylight hours, none of it was frightening. It was empty. I spent the first few nights sleeping on a mattress laid in the center of the main bedroom. The bed creaked, the windows rattled, and the house seemed to inhale and exhale like some slumbering beast. The floorboards under my feet moaned. The walls groaned. A deep bass hum would rise at random times, then fade away as if the house were clearing its throat. On the third night, I was jolted awake at precisely 3:13 a.m. I don't normally remember exact times, but something about this one seared itself into my mind. I heard a soft clunk beneath the floor. It was metallic, dull, and it came from the cellar. I froze. My pulse raced. I held my breath. Another clunk, this time followed by a drag, like metal being slid across stone. The noise moved slowly, deliberately toward the stairs. I didn't stay to listen. I jumped out of bed and turned on every light in the house, even the basement bulb that lit straight from the foyer stairwell. All I heard were my own fists pounding my chest, every heartbeat a cannon shot. I stayed awake until dawn. Over the next day, I tried to think logically. Maybe a pipe released a bolt as it aged, or rats bumped something metal, or the house had settled. But when I returned to the basement, dragging a flashlight behind me like a lifeline. I found something odd. On the wide wooden floor in the corner stood a rusted iron shackle. Simple, dull metal cuff. Edges rough with corrosion, a broken clasp, the opposite half missing. No other hardware. No chain, just one lonely cuff. I stared at it until the skin on my neck crawled. My breath turned shallow. I picked it up. It weighed heavy in my hand. Inside were tone marks, scratches, gouges, signs of wear. I turned it over. It didn't match any modern restraint. Maybe pre-Civil War? I had no idea. I set it on the dusty floor. I considered throwing it away. Instead, I threaded it inside my coat and left. I spent the rest of the day at the nearby town library. I used the public Wi-Fi to research Hillcrest Roadhouse basement shackle and shackles hidden beneath floorboards. Nothing relevant popped up, just a few forum posts about people finding rusted chains or metal parts in old basements. The name of the County Historical Society surfaced, and I bookmarked it. By evening, I was strapped to the shackle's weight in my coat pocket. The basement stairs sat in silence. But inside, I wasn't just uneasy. I felt tethered. Something inside the house was watching. That night, I debated whether to sleep in my car. But all I felt was fatigue. My apartment was mid-move, empty, and I had a couch tangled with boxes waiting there. I decided to stay and pulled on a coat thick enough to hold my coat together, my laptop, some snacks, and the shackle in a bag. I made sure all lights were on. I didn't drink anything stronger than water. I kept towels and a flashlight by the door. At midnight, the house sighed as it cooled. At 1:47 a.m., the hum started again, deep and slow. At 2:59 a.m., I heard drags and clanks through the floor. Then at 3:13 a.m., the shackle in my coat pocket clattered. Metal on metal. I shot upright in bed. My heart thundered. I blinked. The air was still, oddly humid, smelling of earth and rust. I reached into my coat pocket to retrieve the shackle, but it wasn't there. Panic seized me. I yanked the coat off the rack. It lay empty. I threw off the sheets and searched the floor, my hands shaking like the earth had been struck by tremors. No shackle anywhere. I flooded my path outside to the foyer and basement stairs. I turned on the light and peered down. Nothing. My coats, folded neatly on a chair, contained no bag. The shackle wasn't there. I followed my own path, retracing every step back to the basement. No sign. I dared not sleep after that. I stayed awake until dawn. At first light, I did the only sane thing I could. I searched every inch of the house within minutes of my discovery and found it. The shackle was in the basement corner where I'd placed it at the start. Appeared again without explanation. I stood above it, fluorescent light flooding the stairwell, and watched it until I believed it solid again. The pressure in my chest lessened. By midday, I felt an odd sense of dread. The shackle had returned. Why? How? And why the fuck was I glad? I cataloged it with my phone, took photos, zoomed in on the patina, the stamping. No maker's mark I could identify, just odd crosses etched in the metal, two tiny notches in the curve. Like someone carves marks of bars at one time. I spent the rest of the afternoon researching house basement shackles, 1800s America punishment. No results. I emailed the county historian. I stepped into adjacency to the idea that something had been held there and never released. At dusk, I returned home. The basement looked the same, but I had the shackle photos now, data I could carry. Maybe share. Maybe prove madness. That night at 3:13, the clanks returned, louder this time. Not beneath the floorboards, directly beneath my bed. I froze, heartbeat pounding. I watched. I waited. Eventually, the clanking receded. The clunking retreated. The house sighed. My breath uncoiled. I'd survived the first week. I couldn't sleep after the first week. The Shackles' reappearance felt deliberate, like a warning or an invitation. My dreams were no longer restful. They'd become fragmented. Whispers at the window, breath hot on the back of my neck, nails scraping beneath the boards. I would wake at 3:13 with a start, gasping in the dark, convinced someone was standing over me. The creaking floors became voices. The walls took on a living weight. In the waking world, I found myself avoiding rooms. I ate less. The fatigue became part of me. Then I got a phone call from the county historian, who told me she'd found something, long-forgotten jail cell, she said, voice low in the library hallway. Committed to memory by only a few old maps. She arranged to meet me in person at the library. That afternoon, I walked through rows of dusty filing cabinets and yellowed books. She showed me a map dated 1897. There, behind the house, a small square building labeled holding cell, linked by a narrow hall to the basement. She confirmed what I already feared. My house wasn't just a house. It had been a place of imprisonment, maybe torture. I felt my knees go weak. She didn't see the color drain from my face. She asked again to follow her home. I couldn't speak. I nodded and followed her outside into the growing dusk. She drove me back to the house, maps spread across the passenger seat. The cell was gone, raised one summer before 1923. The house had absorbed its foundation. The jail's basement had merged with the house's, floorboards realigned. The whole structure shuddered at the thought. I returned home with the map, overlaying it on my basement floor plan. It fit perfectly over the corner where I found the shackle. Beneath those boards lay prison walls. My hand shook as the sun dropped. I felt cornered. I knew I needed to do something, document news, call a TV crew, tear up boards. I needed to exorcise this place. That night, I set up cameras in the basement and across the sleeping floor. I propped them at angles that captured the shackles' resting place and under the bed. I locked all doors. I shut off exterior lights. I lay awake for hours, watching. At 3:13 a.m., I heard it again, scraping, the soft ratcheting of iron. My skin felt as if the basement was breathing fire through the floorboards. And then, before the cameras, before the bed, it came up through the floor. Clank, clank, clank. They weren't violent, just measured, methodical, like a guard dragging heavy chains between cells. The cameras recorded it all. I'll show you. By morning, I felt exhausted, my vision fuzzy, my lips dry. The cameras had captured nothing visible, only movement from my tripod as the floorboards warped, but the audio. The audio picked up voices. It sounded like men, deep voices moaning, arguing, crying out. Keys. The key. She's coming. Shut it. My own voice at the end whispered no. No. I deleted the footage before I could review it again, too afraid to hear it one more time. Over the next days, I combed the map and old newspapers for names, records. I learned that the jail served the county sheriff between 1895 and 1915. The prisoner held there included petty thieves, drunks, and 3 local women accused of witchcraft in 1905. The women were never released. Their names, Ella Monroe, Margaret Spencer, Lillian Tate. Charges were never detailed. The jail was quietly shut after their disappearance. Their records ended. No trial, no burial. I spent one evening in the wood-paneled public records room, photocopying everything I could. I photographed the old stone jail cell drawings. One plan showed shackles embedded in the walls, wired to a board, floor traps. I saw where they broke the boards to bolt the cuffs in place. Standing there, my hand against the grainy blueprint, I realized the shackle I'd found was one of those. My grandfather had been sheriff in the late 80s. He would have known. Removed, kept it, or worse. That night, I decided to go deeper. I returned to the house at 1 a.m. The snow fell silently. The streetlights icily glowed down the road. I felt small, naked. I opened the basement door and switched on the lights. I pulled my phone's video camera from my pocket and pressed record. I pried up the single floorboard over the shackle. Beneath it lay a narrow pit, long enough for a person to stand in if they were tall enough, walls lined with brick. I dropped the board in place and hammered it shut. Something behind me clanged. My breath seized. I stared at the closed board. Screwdriver in hand, I pulled it loose, pried it up again. Within the hole, I saw not the shackle, but bones. Human bones. White, slick, brittle. Finger bones. A jawbone. The shackle lay chained to the floor, joist still, rusty clasp and all. I dropped the camera and scrambled back toward the stairwell, but as I did, the lights flickered. The basement's hum rose like a heartbeat. I sprinted up, slammed the door, and locked it. Upstairs, I collapsed, sobbing. I didn't move from the dining room chair until morning. The shackle lay in my coat pocket again. I didn't want to open the basement, but necessity drove me. In daylight, it felt less alive, less dangerous. And I'm nothing if not stubborn. I returned inside and sat above the trap. I recorded with my phone while leaning in, flashlight angled in. I filmed myself prying up the floorboard again. It clattered away. The pit stared back, deep black. The shackle lay there, still chained, still holding bones. They were small, child-sized, fingers long, tiny jaw crushed. The shackle's chain burrowed into the wood. I photographed it from every angle, kissed off each bone fragment from the pit for closer inspection. My hands trembled. I jammed the board back down, hammered it in place. There was a sound in that moment, a slow, deep exhalation, as if the house had sighed, loosened its hold. That night, I slept again on the living room floor. I had planned to leave first thing. The house seemed quiet, almost relieved. But at 3:13 a.m., it wasn't silent. The hum returned, deep and resonant, waking me. Chains rattled overhead, beneath me, around me. They were slow at first, but building. I couldn't help it. I reached down and touched the floor. It was warm, hot. I could feel something moving beneath, drumming, thumping. I felt air move beneath my palm. And then, utterly clear, beneath the floorboards, came a voice. Help me. I dropped to my knees as the floor vibrated gently around me. I could smell damp stone and blood. I couldn't think. I could barely breathe. But I remembered. Leave. Leave now. Tears streamed as I left the house, the basement door slamming itself, the front door locking as if behind me someone pushed it. The last thing I saw from the porch light was the single floorboard lift, just enough to let a shaft of cold light into the basement corner, and then it closed. I couldn't stay away. The hunger to know what the house held beneath its floorboards, what hooked my mind with those rusty shackles, was stronger than fear. I returned before dawn when the mist blanketed the street and the world felt hushed. Inside, the foyer light flickered as if waking from a dream. I didn't bother with a flashlight. I walked straight to the basement, one hand trailing the cool banister. Behind me, each creak felt like memory stretching into now. My breath echoed. I pressed the basement door open. Dim light pooled from the stairwell. The cellar lamp swung faintly, though no breeze moved. At the trapdoor, I paused. My heart pounded. I lifted and dropped it back gently. It fell open at an angle. I dropped down. Dust clouded around me. Floorboards eyesore gray. The pit waited. I lifted the illuminated cell beneath the floor. Dark pit, vertical walls of brick. I lifted the single board and looked down. No shackle, no bones. The pit was clean, emptier than before. Something shifted behind me, a soft coppery drag, a breath. I turned and swept the beam across the room. It landed on the far wall. Faded symbols scratched into the wood. A circle with spokes, then parallel lines. They weren't anything I recognized. Like child scrawl, ritual rupture, my reflamed pulse set those scraps of wood crawling. Help me. The voice was a murmur from the wall itself. A child's tone, not quite pleading, but soft and endless. I froze. My phone app shut off. I tried to turn it back on, but the beam stayed dark. Then the cellar lamp snapped on. I looked up. Nothing moved the cord. My flashlight sputtered. The beam lit again and caught her. Faint under wood, past the pit, you could see her. Frail outline behind the dusty veil. Skinny arms folded across her chest, head tipped sideways. She didn't move. Her eyes' deep hollow's mouth wavered as if smiling. I swallowed with agony. I backed up and heard a floorboard snap behind me. I lunged for the stairs. The lamp went out. My heart thrashed. I shambled up into the house, burst through the basement door, and didn't stop until the front porch lantern was behind me, flickering. That morning I wrote everything down. I needed a record of what I saw, but every letter felt insufficient. The symbols, her posture, the hush inside the walls. I tried to eat, but no flavor reached my tongue. I skipped sleep and visited the town archives, requesting forestry maps, building plans, attic photographs from the 1950s. The archivist looked at me like I asked for a ghost. In the afternoon, I found an obituary. A local girl named Abilene Myers, Northeast Wing, died 3 days after birth in 1890. No photograph, no grave site, just one death notice tucked away in a jumble. Veteran put down like old wood. No mention of her father, her mother, anything else. The chills that crawled over me after reading it in print were no surprise. I knew what she was from before. I'd seen her when the lamp burned. That night, I didn't return to the house. I stayed in another town motel, but I heard the hum in the walls through the wall panel. It wasn't wood, it was beyond walls. I returned at midnight the next day. I went straight into the basement, ignoring the foyer. The lamp was off. I flicked on my own Amazon lantern and knelt by the trapdoor. I pressed a hand to the boards. The floor vibrated. I looked down again. The pit waited. I dropped in. This time, I carried a camera. I recorded the walls. Stones, brick, empty corners. Then I set the camera on the floor and backed away. The pit flickered into darkness. I pressed record and whispered, "Show yourself." I heard the chains first, distant behind the brick walls. They shuddered. Soft ET rattle. Slowly they pulled. The board over the pit rattled. Then the whisper, "Please help me." It came from the pit. The chains rattled again. The camera caught movement. Something darker than the shadow crawling along the far wall behind the pit. I lunged toward it, shined the lantern. Nothing. I left the trap closed and climbed out. My lantern fell and broke. The glass shattered, cutting my palm. I didn't care. My skin was raw. Days slid by. I barely slept. My phone glitched with whispered static. My apartment in the U.S., where I lived half the week, I kept seeing scratches across the walls. And the shackle. Still on my bedside. Heavy reminder. Sometimes at 3 a.m., I'd wake to find it gone and returned. That night, I lit incense in the basement. I said a prayer from memory. I placed a candle by the pit and chanted aloud. My voice echoed. No answer. But then the candle flame leapt. The scent stung. I turned away, heard a whisper sharp and urgent behind me. I spun. The pit was empty under the board, but the shackle hung from it, clinking softly. You brought me back. The temperature dropped. My glasses fogged. The cellar light flickered from above, though no current was on. I ran. Sun rose with the house silent again. But I heard words in the hum. Don't leave. Let me in. The final night of part 3 found me once again kneeling in the basement. I removed every floorboard around the trap. I exposed the bricks and pit in full. I shined my phone light deep into the black. I whispered into the void. Abilene, I'm here. A breeze swept through the cellar. My hair lifted. I pressed record and waited. Then I heard chains clinking, closer this time. Thank you. It came clear, her voice with a child's awe. And in the beam of neon from the stairwell, I saw fingers emerge from the pit around its bricks. Pale and thin and raw. They scraped against brick. They moved toward the boards. I pulled the camera and ran upstairs. The basement door slammed. The floors above rattled, as if someone heavy moved beneath. The air above me hummed with her voice. You freed me. Now I'll return. Now I'm coming. I returned to my apartment and moved nearly everything inside a locked trash bin, clothes, books, random items, anything I thought might serve as talismans or protective charms against what I'd released. I slept for 3 hours at a time, waking to jolts, cold sweats, fragments of lullabies stuck in my head. I stopped answering calls. I stopped eating more than a bite. My world had narrowed, and nothing existed beyond the shackle and the house. I woke one morning to the sound of children laughing. It bounced around my apartment walls, rolling like distant thunder. I jumped up frightened and followed it to my window. Street empty. No kids. The voice stopped. An echo remained in the hallway. Something running. Wooden footsteps. I looked down at the shackle on my desk. It lay flat, unbroken, clasped. Heavy. I picked it up. It rattled softly. I understand, now it talks. That night, I drove out to the house again. I parked on the street, walked to the porch. The door was unlocked. I barely remember entering. I flicked lights on automatically. They hummed. The boards were missing. The basement stairs both open and closed. The house felt like something stretched, alive. I ascended slowly. In the living room, I found soot on the carpet, thin and cold. My breath came out in mist, even though it was mild outside. I went straight to the basement with trembling steps. I found a bottle of mishandled sanitizer and duct tape in my pocket. Odd. I pressed sanitizer near the pit and lit a candle at the trap. I knelt, breath shaky. I sprinkled sanitizer on the floor and used tape to mark a circle around the trap door on the basement floor, protective barrier, maybe. I spoke words I'd researched, some old invocation from a grimoire, half Latin, half nonsense, but meant to bind spirits. It worked sort of. The lights pulsed above me in time with my chant. The house stopped breathing, but in the silence I heard whispers, soft, chanting voices, a chorus. It wasn't chanting in any language, chords intertwined, high and low, words not meant for mouths. I opened my eyes. 2 candles were gone, shoved aside, the duct tape lines cut, the invocation circle broken. The basement lamp was swaying. I stood. It swung faster, whispering, crescendoing. Then darkness fell. When I turned the flashlight on again, the room looked empty, except for writing. Not on walls, but on boards. Words scratched across every plank around the pit. You let me cross, I am here, you meet me now. I heard movement behind me. I spun and saw. She hovered above the pit. At first, only her shape, half flesh, half wood. Then she stepped forward, crawling from a crack in the trap. Knees hit the floor. Arms reached for me. I held the flashlight on her face. White eyes faint with sorrow. Mouth stretched wide like would split open. Her voice crawled into my head without leaving her mouth. I'm home. I stumbled backward, tripped. Paint flakes dusted the air. Her finger brushed my ankle. I cried out. She withdrew, backing toward the trap. The boards creaked as if bending inward. I ran. The basement door snapped shut behind me. Upstairs, I found the front door sitting wide open, moonlight pooling inside. I stepped out, and it shut fast with a crack. In the coming days, I felt watched in my own home. The shackle rattled on my desk without contact. I heard her tapping under floorboards on midnight. Lights blinked. Whispers layered over words and conversations. Warnings, pleas, laughter. I confronted the house. I returned again at dusk, set lines of salt at thresholds, chalking symbols over basement entrances. The house seemed to breathe steam. I waited until 3 a.m. The salt burned black. Chalk line shattered. The trap door vibrated. The basement tremored. I ran before sunrise. I returned weeks later with a geologist friend to sample soil in the yard. The earth turned easily, loose and cold, except beneath the basement solid boards. We drilled. We heard chains. The drill jammed. He nearly fell in. He left early, pale, eyes sunken. He whispered, "It's alive." Last night, I went alone. I removed 4 boards entirely, not just pried. We worked with crowbars and saws, and my hands bled. We uncovered a brick wall behind the basement pit, but in the wall was embedded the other half of the shackle, sealed in plaster and brick, joined to the shackle and the pit by rusted chain burrowed deep in wood and mortar. I whispered, the 2 halves meant release or binding. I pulled the trapped half with pliers. The chain rattled like a bell knell. The brick cracked. Behind it was space, a cold hollow. I shined light inside. I saw ribs. Bone shards. The girl's body? Someone's body. In the pit. Against the wall. Chain rattled. Footsteps overhead. The house groaned. I felt her presence behind me. I dropped everything. Left my watch, phone, tools, they lay in place. I drove away, leaving the house smoldering with revelations and unspeakable hunger. My shirt smeared with dirt and blood and dust. Now I sit in a motel again, this time far enough that the house cannot find me. But I hear something every midnight, the soft rattle of chain on stone. It wakes me. I know what's coming. I left the house as far behind as I could, but the weight never lifted. The first night away, I dreamed of feet dragging through mud, footsteps that followed me home. I woke to find a shackle under my pillow. No way for it to crawl there. No logic in that impossible fact. The next day, I drove, searching for a cabin or stranger's basement I could leave it in. I stopped at a remote park. I buried the shackle under pine needles beneath a fallen log and walked away, bleeding sweat through every pore. When I look back, I swear I saw a small hand imprint in the pine bark. Walking back to my car, I noticed my shoes were wet. I wiped them on the seat. They were clean and dry. That's when the hunch of dread arrived. Not fear. The sense of being hunted, of being carved. I tried to go normal. Back in civilization, back in routines. But in the newspaper stand, I saw it, a small article in small print, historic house on Hillcrest Road, reopening for tours. A photo of the facade. The basement grate had been pried open. Chains hanging inside, now displayed like curios in the window. I pocketed my coffee, hands shaking. That tag, Knox and Shackles exhibit, laughable. Trembling, I took photos. Share them online. Not a single reply. Just ghosts staring in windows and hollow hearts that couldn't hear. That night, the chain rattled under the floorboards of my apartment. Soft metal on metal, dragging low, directly beneath the bed. And the whisper, I am coming. I couldn't avoid it. I drove back with a plan, confront the museum staff, subpoena the artifacts, destroy or recover them. I arrived at the tour house late, slipping inside through a side window. I found the snaking metal chain at the basement grate, rusted but intact. A tour guide appeared, unannounced, her flashlight shining at me. Are you lost? She smiled. Blonde, calm professional. I shoved the chain and left it at my feet. That belongs to me. My voice cracked but firm. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She just nodded. Then she said, we all belong. Her words made my chest clamp. She stepped aside and opened the grate. Behind it, faint glow and chains coiled around each other like serpents. I took a breath. I reached in, metal bit my flesh. Pain, blood, but I yanked the chain and pulled. It came loose. I stood, triumphant in the basement gloom, chest heaving, until the world trembled. The tour guide was gone. The grate slammed shut. The chain in my hands grew cold and soft. It wrapped around me like serpentine scales and tightened until I dropped to my knees. I woke in a motel room burning with fever. The chain lay on the floor, metal dull and silent. My arms felt skinned, raw around the biceps. Shallow grooves like someone stitched cloth too tight. I pulled the chain, cold and heavy as guilt. I tried to sleep, but the door rattled. A bang, something knocked on the wall. My phone slipped from the nightstand and projected a reflection of me in the dark window, half my face gone, replaced by wooden texture, flaking skin. A shout tore from my throat, but no one came. By dawn, I was silent. I went to the local hotel desk and checked out. I flew to my grandmother's. She's out west. I thought maybe being with family would make the world stop spinning. She greeted me calmly seated in a rocking chair with a quilt as old as me draped around her legs. I smelled pine and lavender. I sat down and she pulled back the quilt and looked at me. It's here. I stared at her. She gestured to my right arm. I curled my sleeve. There was a thin, dark line circling halfway around my wrist as if burned into my flesh. It glowed faintly in the dark. She spoke in voice too certain for comfort. The shackles mark those bound by the house. You carry her. She carries you. She will follow you until you take her home. She showed me a photo album. Old Polaroids, your grandfather and mother, all standing in front of the house, arms marked like mine. face blank, weary. She shook her head. Your inheritance is a keeping, not property. You rebound across generations. Only one free of the chain died on Hillcrest steps. My grandmother's house felt like sanctuary until midnight when chain rattles echoed in her floorboards too. I sat in the living room, notes scattered, multiple photos of the chain, my marked arm. The chain lay coiled at my feet as I faced cameras and lights and bees of memory buzzing behind eyelids. In the deep dark I whispered, "Take me home." It hissed once, small and bony, and then grew still. I got up, looped the chain around my wrist again, and left. I returned home on first snow of December. Town was silent, world unplowed and white. I carried a tool bag and the chain. The latch for the grate had been newly welded shut, but paint chipped easily. I pried it free. In the basement, I laid down the chain to the old shackle, still embedded in mortar. I fitted the two halves. Metal snapped with ring of final locking. Sparks glowed. Chains rattled loud enough to ring. A figure in the corner stepped forward. Her image flickered like shadow fire. She wore a dress of boards, eyes black glass, hair splintered wood. She smiled. You came back. I knelt and whispered, I'm free now. She tilted her head and pressed her hand to the chains. Chains wrapped over me, over her, bleeding into the wall. Then home. She vanished into mist. The chains sank. The grate slammed shut. I stepped onto the porch as twilight fell, snow swirling like ash around me. The house sat silent but alive, its windows dark yet somehow glowing from within like lids of slumbering eyes. The air smelled thick with smoke and frost. I carried the chain and the shackle wrapped together, clutched in a wool sack, each link still warm from my skin. The latch squealed when I opened the front door. Inside the foyer, dust motes drifted in the single bulb overhead. The house exhaled as I entered, and the floorboards creaked like a heartbeat. My fingers tightened around the sack. I had come to end this, or begin something else. I switched on every light. Lamps, sconces, basement bulbs, flickers in the cold. Every switch threw the house into a flutter. Hum, silence, hum, silence. I waited. Shadows retreated into corners. I exhaled. The chain rattled in my bag. The house murmured back. At 11:59 p.m., I opened the basement door. Blue flame glowed beneath the trap, as if incinerating ice. The grate under the house door vibrated like wind rushing under a gate. I carried the chain and the shackle down the stairs. Each step echoed. Each breath caught. I passed the carved symbols we'd etched earlier. They burned faintly in the lamp glow. I threw open the trap. Steam rolled upward. Ice breath. I knelt and unpacked the chain and shackle. The brick wall that had concealed the embedded shackle showed fine cracks. I set both next to each other on the old wood. At midnight, the house breathed deep again. The light flared. Shadows spun. The scuttling of chains began, echoing from every wall. I looped the chain into the shackle clasp with trembling hands. Each link clicked. My fingers shook. My wrist stung. I tested the clasp. It latched shut, metal bit into flesh. I heard her voice low in my head. You are mine. I didn't answer. The chains sprang to life. They snaked across the floor, wrapping around the pit, forming a spiral that wound inward toward me. I couldn't stand. I crouched in the center. Snow dust clung to my boots where light seeped from upstairs through cracks. She appeared above the spiral, floating on a feathered draft. Her dress was boards and plaster. In her eyes, wood grain shimmered alive. Her beauty was bone white. Thank you set her voice like metal in cold steel. Chains slid against skin. I hissed pain hot. I looked upward. The walls cracked as the spiral glowed. Cold flame licked the joints. Boards bowed. I heard distant prayers being sung backward. You belong to me now, she whispered. I tried to speak. My tongue drowsed. I reached for the chains to tear them. They pulled me under pressure. My breath labored. Free me home, I said, voice broken. She tilted her head. I freed you when you freed me, she whispered. Time fractured. The brick wall behind the pit cracked open. I saw families through centuries. My grandfather as a child playing in this room, reaching under the floor. I saw the women held in shackles, the lost prisoner in her bedroll. They were all bound to her, to me, to Hillcrest. I realized then why the chain had followed me, why it tightened around my wrist. It was not attachment. It was an inheritance, a pact. I clutched the chain and pulled with all my strength. Links rattled free from the spiral. Windows shattered from above. Boards ripped open. The house began to collapse inward, timbers splitting, plaster raining, bricks sloughing. Chains peeled from my body. The spiral cracked. Light flared. Frost bloomed across walls, silicon cracks like crystalline veins. She wailed, like torn steel. I fell backward onto the spiral. My wrist slipped free of the shackle. The chain dropped, clattering away, glowing blue and then cold black. I curled into a ball. The tempest faded. The spiral dissolved into dust and snow. Light died. Silence dropped. At dawn I climbed out, stumbling into the snowfall. The house behind me sat collapsed inward like drawn eyelids. No steam, no breathing. Only the hills cloaked in cold. My wrist bore the ring of the chain, bruised purple. My chest ached deep where the spiral pressed tight. I felt empty. A part of the house might be gone, but something in me remained. I walked uphill toward town. The chain lay in the shredded bag at my side, broken, inert. I write this now from the town library column chair. I buried the chain pieces in separate graves, each beneath names. Monroe, Spencer, Tate, Abilene Myers, my grandfather, myself. I sealed their names into the earth. But ink bleeds on paper. The bruises on my wrist refuse to clear. And tonight, I heard a metallic whisper through the stud walls. I am here. So I make this last promise. I will return. I will stand at Hillcrest on another winter's night. I will hear the boards crack. I'll keep the pact, because some legacies don't end. They wait, beneath the floorboards, waiting to bind another.